This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
One of the questions that always comes to mind when you travel to some of the far-flung places in the world, some of the mysterious sites, Machu Picchu, Stonehenge, Gilgal Rephaim, how did the ancients move those really big stones? How did they cut those stones? And more importantly, why did they bother? Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me is a gentleman who's made this his life's work. He is the host of the Stargate Voyager podcast, which is available on all major platforms. YouTube, you can find him on social media, X, TikTok, Facebook, and so on. And it is an honor to welcome to the program Derek Olson. Derek, thanks for joining us today.
Derek, thank you for having me on. The pleasure's mine. And like we said when I interviewed you, this is kind of cool to be interviewed by another Derek that spells it the same way.
That's true. We are rare enough as it is, but to find it spelled correctly, I can count on one hand the number of Dereks that I've personally met, and several of them are also Derek Gilberts. We found each other through Facebook. We got sort of a small club of like three guys. You've really focused on this aspect of human history, megalithic structures. In fact, previously your site, your social media presence was Megalithic Marvels. What is it that attracts you to sites like Stonehenge, just to pick one, the better known at random? Why are you interested in these things?
Yeah, great question. I was always into ancient history, ancient architecture and mysteries. And man, there's just something about going out and getting to touch these places. And some of it's just an innate sense, I think, that I believe these things are far more ancient on average than we have been told. And so part of that cover-up is what draws me to these sites to investigate, to research, and to try to awaken minds like many other great researchers like yourself, that there is a whole other hidden history that in large part's been hidden from us. And so this just makes me, I guess maybe it's part of the rebellion in me wants to find the truth, seek the truth, on these sites. You mentioned Stonehenge. This is an incredible example of, if people haven't heard yet, this new discovery at Stonehenge has literally left the mainstream scientists stunned. And again, if you haven't heard, new groundbreaking research revealed that the altar stone, it's called, which is at the very center of the site, and it's pretty much buried all the way underground. I just was there and saw this before the news broke. But new research has determined that this giant 6.5-ton stone that measures 16 feet long was not transported from Wales as previously thought some 5,000 years ago, but transported all the way from northern Scotland over 400 miles away. Mm-hmm. And so this to me is super exciting because when you start reading all the research papers, you've got mainstream scientists that are literally dumbfounded at how this was possible when they tell us these were just, primitive people for the most part with primitive tools, right? So I love how mainstream is being forced with discoveries like this at Stonehenge and Göbekli Tepe to admit our history goes way back further than we thought, and the ancients were much more advanced than we thought.
We had one opportunity to visit Stonehenge back in 2019. Sharon and I, with couple of friends, were traveling across the UK looking at sites that she writes about in her series, The Red Wing Saga, and we were on our way to Gloucester. Didn't realize that the road we were on would take us right past Stonehenge. Suddenly we look out the right-hand windows of the car. It's like, oh, wow. So missed it. Hopefully we can make up for that next time we go back to the UK, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later. But yeah, that really is amazing that. And again, I know there's a lot of speculation, especially in the niche of fringe Christianity that we occupy. When we look at Genesis chapter 6 and take the Nephilim as literal giants, certainly the Jews of the Second Temple period understood it that way, that these semi-divine or demigods were larger than average. that, maybe they were responsible. Okay, maybe they were, but still, there was a lot of energy that was expended in doing this. And I think the bigger question is why? Why did they put so much time into it? In fact, I learned about the Scottish connection from a post that you shared on social media. So thank you for doing that. But that site is actually drew people from all over the UK, we've learned.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Stonehenge, it's an incredible site. And some people don't know its original name was the Giant's Dance. And one of the first drawings we have of Stonehenge back during medieval times is it shows Stonehenge with a massive giant, leaning against one of the stones, and Merlin, the folkloric magician there. And so again, Giant's Dance hints at giants. It hints at frequency in music. There's some great research coming out that Stonehenge was some kind of megalithic musical instrument generating various frequencies. And there's an author named Andrew Collins who theorizes that it's the builders of Stonehenge were trying to replicate the primordial frequency of creation. So very interesting. Something else to point out, when I was there, I got to meet author Maria Wheatley at Avebury, but she just wrote a new book called The Secrets of Stonehenge. And so when this news broke about Stonehenge, I kind of checked on her Facebook to see what she was saying. And she had two interesting nuggets that I think are worth sharing. She mentions how, everybody's talking about this stone that came from Scotland. She says there was actually two stones that came from far away. And there was two altar stones, and there's one missing that's not in the circle anymore. It was stolen by King James I and the Duke of Buckingham in 1624, and they carted it away to St. James Palace in London. So it was literally stolen by a royal decree, and she's trying to seek its whereabouts. So that's kind of a cool piece of info, is that there was actually two stones brought from likely Scotland. And that's something else that she points out in her book. She talks about the mysterious long-headed civilization. Because guess what? Just like in Peru, there has been all kinds of elongated skulls found at Stonehenge, at Avebury, and these were humanoid-looking entities. And the crazy part is, when I was visiting Avebury, this massive stone circle, one of the biggest in the world, there's a village built in the center of it and bookstores. We were about to leave the site, and somebody in our tour group said, "Hey, have you seen the strange skulls in the museum?" Well, when somebody says strange skulls, that gets my attention.
Sure.
And so I ran over and paid the $5 or $6, whatever it was, to get into this little museum. Blew past all of the, most of the artifacts there, and I was looking for these strange skulls. And sure enough, and I can send you photos of these if you want to post them somewhere. There was what Maria Wheatley writes about, these ethereal-looking humanoids, elongated skulls that extend back, but the strange part is they have really skinny faces. And so she basically makes the connection between this ancient hybrid-looking race and a lot of these ancient Neolithic burial chambers and long tombs, and how they might be the genesis of folkloric beings such as elves and stuff like that. So there is so much more to ancient Britain and all of that history than we know, and it's fascinating.
It really is. What is really intriguing are the strange parallels in those sorts of long chamber burials. There's a term for them, and I've forgotten what it is right out off the top of my head, because we've seen long barrow, but there's another word for it. But it's basically where you've got a tomb with a long entryway to get to the center of the tomb where the burial took place, because you find those in the Levant as well, the southern Levant specifically. There are a bunch of them around Gilgal Rephaim, which is on the Golan Heights, about 10 miles east of the Sea of Galilee. And on the Golan Heights, you've got over 5,000 megalithic structures, and many of them have that sort of barrow shape, like dolmen in the center covered with a tumulus, but there's a chamber that you have to go through, a tunnel that you have to enter to get to that. And that essentially is just a smaller version of Gilgal Rephaim. The central core is that way. You have to enter through a chamber. You cross what they call a threshold stone to get into the central core. One of the things I discovered in researching my first book was that the practice of head shaping, and I know L.A. Marzulli and others, Brian Forster, have done some work on the Peruvian skulls, the Paracas skulls, and shown that there's some anomalies there that suggest that maybe it's not the result of head binding or anything like that. But this appears to have been, in the ancient Near East, a universal practice going back to about 10,000 BC, which would be roughly the time of the construction of Göbekli Tepe. There was something about that practice that was practiced, that was a universal across all social classes, it appears. Something about that shape. So whether these were genetic, which nobody's researched as far as I know, I think credentialed scholars are afraid to touch that particular topic because it would probably be the end of their academic career. But again, I think the bigger question is, why would they do it? If it wasn't genetic, why were they doing it? The same question that we ask about these big megalithic sites. Why did they spend so much effort at a time before the invention of the wheel, before the invention of pottery, before the invention, not to mention writing? Why were they spending all of this effort to build these massive structures? There was something very important about them, and clearly it wasn't for food or defense. It had to be a religious structure of some sort.
Yeah, no, exactly 100%. And I lean towards the elite of this golden age, and even after, were likely the ones that had the natural elongated skulls, and then that the general population, was trying to emulate this ruling class. And I just got back from Peru and got to see several strange elongated skulls. Sadly, it appears that there might be a cover-up underway right now in Peru to start systematically removing the biggest, most fantastic elongated skulls. We had a pre-tour in Nazca, and so our group, I wasn't able to make the pre-tour portion, but they were supposed to go visit the Paracas Museum, which houses the biggest, most famous collection of elongated skulls. And that museum shut down. So then they go to the Inca Museum in the next town over that houses the infamous Chongo skull, which is probably the biggest elongated skull from Peru you can see if you Google Chongo skull. This thing's got huge eye sockets. It looks like it's got almost 40% more cranial mass than our skulls. And cradle headboarding, it can shape, but it can't make more mass.
Right,
Again,
right.
This has more mass. As L.A. Marzulli would point out, the foramen magnum, where our neck attaches to the skull, on us, it's in the center. Bottom of our skulls, on these elongated natural skulls of Peru, it's in the very back. So very strange genetic stuff there. All that to say, the Chongo skull was not on display. Well, then on our way up to Cusco, we stopped by the Andahuaylas Museum, which houses one of the other famous skulls known as Waiki. And this is the one you've seen photos of on the cover of probably so many books. It looks basically like it's an alien, if you can say that. We go into this museum, and they had a fake in there. And I called out the museum curator who was giving us a tour. I said, I was just here last year. That is a replica, right? And she admitted, yeah, it is a replica. And so it's crazy that the biggest skulls you could see in Peru are not on display right now. So I hope it doesn't mean they're systematically removing these.
Our dog Grace is in the background now. She's alerting me that our contractor's doing a little work on the house, has just come back from lunch. Thank you, Grace. Thank you. We heard similar stories when we were in Sardinia of the removal of the bones of the giants from the giants' tombs. There's like 200 of those across the island of Sardinia. What would the purpose be, in your opinion, for trying to remove these anomalous artifacts from public display?
Yeah, great question. I think as many have said, those who control the past control the future. And so if they can, when people see these skulls, if you're any type of a critical thinking person, in my humble opinion, you just know, again, when you especially see one of these big ones that's clearly what I would say a naturally elongated skull, I believe this is a descendant of the Nephilim or something like that. It's a hybrid, right? Well, then that leads to all kinds of questions, like where did this come from? And if you've heard about the Nephilim or Genesis 6:4, you might, start reading that. And so I believe one of the reasons for the cover-up is that people seeing these skulls leads to way too many questions, which probably takes them off the Darwinian paradigm. It creates too many problems if we realize there was this whole other hybrid race separate from humanity, if that makes sense. And something else I should point out, again, having just been in Peru and talking to some of our guides who descend from the Inca, what a fascinating place. So even in the time of the Inca, and I believe that, and we can talk more in depth about this in a minute if you want, but most of these sites we see in Peru, right, way predate the Inca. The Inca found these megalithic superstructures, began building on top of them. Excuse me. But even during the time of the Inca, their most valued possessions were these elongated skulled mummies. And according to the Inca's own mythology, during the solstices, winter and summer solstice, they would bring these prized possessions that they venerated out of hiding, and they would place these elongated skulls, mummies, they call them wakas. And these are the megalithic looking altar type structures. And they would place these elongated skulled humanoids inside. And when the solstice would hit, according to the Inca's own mythology, these elongated skull mummies would become animated, and they would begin to speak to the Inca and give them, laws and tell them orders and give them vision for the upcoming years. So I just found that so fascinating. And you see in a lot of these elongated skull mummies, you'll see a hole in the top of the head. And so as I've dug and done some research, again, the Inca's own mythology says that when these things were alive, these entities, they would do this surgery and place a golden artifact in its head to help it better connect with the gods. And so crazy to consider. I know I said a lot there, but...
No, it's actually, again, the connection to the other side of the world is evident in the 6th century BC when the last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, was digging the foundation for the Temple of Jupiter. They found a well-preserved human head. And in the Etruscan religion, because Tarquin was an Etruscan, they used human skulls, human heads, to communicate with the spirits, the divine. It was like a portal through which they could speak and hear information back, which may speak to why in the ancient world, you get back to the Natufian culture in the ancient Near East, roughly the time of Göbekli Tepe again. You've got what appears to be skull cults everywhere from Çatalhöyük and Göbekli Tepe in what is now southern Turkey down to Jericho. We saw some of the plastered Jericho skulls when we were in Amman, Jordan last year, which is fascinating. They kept them on display. We don't know what they were used for because they hadn't invented writing yet, but it's possible it was something similar to what the descendants of the Incas say these mummies were used for, a tool for communicating with the spirit realm.
Yeah, those plaster covered skulls that you just mentioned from Jericho, that is so crazy to see and to consider. Why were they covering these things with plaster like this? It looks so bizarre. So,
Well, again, we don't know because again, you're talking a prehistoric culture without writing as far as we know. So we can only guess, but it just makes you wonder that if they were preserved for the same purpose as the Etruscans in the classical era and the Peruvians in late antiquity, if they were using these things as a way to communicate with the spirit realm, which again gets back to the reason that they built these megalithic structures in the first place. Why spend all this time, money, effort, energy, use all this building material? It could have been used for defensive walls against their enemies, and use it to. I mean, Gilgal Rephaim on the Golan Heights has an estimated 45 to 65,000 tons of stone. I've seen the estimate of the amount of stone at Stonehenge at less than 2,000 tons. So that gives you an idea how much rock they had to move. Now, none of the stones are as big as at Stonehenge. They're all like still heavy, 40 to 80 pounds apiece, but there was just a lot of them. Back to Peru, though, the Incas, as you say, admit that they didn't build the megalithic sites like Teotihuacan, or not pronouncing it correctly, I'm sure. Teotihuacan, yeah. I'm conflating with Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it. Anyway.
Or Tiwanaku, sorry, yeah.
Tiwanaku, yeah. Machu Picchu, those sites like that. There's a difference in Cusco, where you see the walls that were built, the original walls, and the walls that were added on or repaired by the Incas. There's a definite difference in construction quality. The Inca work is much less refined. Do the Incas have any stories about where these ancients came from, who they were?
Yeah, yeah. When you read some of the Inca's own, I guess a lot of the history we get, the Inca didn't necessarily have a written language, but we can take a lot from what the Spanish said about the Inca. When the conquistadors were coming through, a lot of the Spanish chroniclers wrote, some very wealth of information about the Inca. In some of these Spanish writings talk about, how the Inca said, hey, we didn't build these, because when the Spanish arrived, they said, hey, did you build this in Cusco? And they were like, no, this was already here. And one thing I've really picked up on the last couple years in Peru is the legend of the Hanan Pacha. And this means the three worlds. And comes from a researcher named Jesus Gamarra and his father, who are some of the, I believe, the best original knowledge keepers in the Cusco area. And so the legend of the Hanan Pacha talks about the three worlds. And so you have number one, the Hanan Pacha. This is a word that means the first culture. And this was the ancient civilization that shaped the bedrock and engineered the biggest cyclopean walls. So like you've probably heard of Sacsayhuaman, one of my favorite sites. Mm-hmm. It's got 200 plus ton interlocking megalithic blocks. I believe this was made by the first culture. And again, a lot of the Incan legends do say there was giants building a lot of this. And so you got the Hanan Pacha, the first culture, who didn't just build the big walls, but shaped some of the mountains and the bedrocks themselves. What I mean is when you go to a site named Ollantaytambo in the Sacred Valley, and you look across the valley, one of the mountain peaks has literally been shaped into the face of Viracocha. It's like a massive king head with a beard. And then when you go around the corner at Ollantaytambo, there's it's called the Temple of the Condor. You look up at this mountainous rock outcropping, and the whole thing's been shaped to look like a gigantic condor. And then you go all above the Cusco Highlands, you'll see, rock outcroppings, and it's like someone went through with laser lightsabers and just cut them all up. Precision. This was likely this first pre-Diluvian culture. again, the Hanan Pacha. And this also refers to the highest level of consciousness, which is represented by the condor, again, which is embedded everywhere. Then you've got number 2, the Uran Pacha. This is the second culture who came later and still had fragments of this lost knowledge and technology, but they engineered the smaller sized precision mortarless walls that we see like at the Coricancha, downtown Cusco. This was the crown jewel of the Inca Empire. There's now a Catholic church built on top of it, but it's still precision mortarless engineering, but it's small and intricate. It just looks different, right? And the Uran Pacha is represented by the Puma, who you see embedded into all the walls. And then lastly, you've got the Ucan Pacha, which basically is the third culture. This is the Inca coming along later and building on top of the other 2. And so I think there's a good... I think there's teeth to this theory of 3 separate civilizations. And if I could mention one of my favorite sites in all of Peru, and I've told the story on some other podcasts, but it's a site known as Napa Huaca or Napa Iglesia. It's in the Sacred Valley. And most people go to the Sacred Valley to see Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo. Most people don't realize that, to me, one of the best sites in all of Peru is right there, hidden in this mountain valley, and up the side of a mountain into this cave. And you walk into this, and I can send you pictures. You walk into this cave, and you see this what looks like a massive Stargate. It's like 4D in dimension, the layers into this wall. It's like a door into the mountain. Of course, it's a faux door. It doesn't actually go in, but it is precision, again, laser-like cut. I hate using that phrase. And then at the center of the cave, when you walk in, is what looks like a console or an altar with these 3 seats. It's wild. Well, when I went there years ago with Brian Forster, he had a kind of this shaman guide that was with us. And he takes us up, and this guy told us that according to the Inca, this was one of the most sacred, as they call it, wakas to the Inca. This was a sacred place, a temple. And so he didn't want us going in without, being sprayed down with his incense. And I was thinking, oh man, where's he going with this? So we get inside and we're inspecting these megaliths, right? Built into this cave, which is so remote. Nobody brought power tools up there, right? To create these megaliths. That's what I love about this site. It's so remote. And so as we're in there, he's explaining to us that this was called, this was a portal to the Inca, and that the way you got the key to go through the portal in that massive door on the side was you would, on the solstice, June 21st, I believe, you'd kneel down at the console looking thing, place your head in the hole. There was like a precision drill hole, and the light would pass through and it would give you the key, and then you could enter the door and pass through interdimensionally, right, to other locations. Again, this is Inca legend. Well, so we're all thinking, okay, that's pretty fantastic. And we're exploring this cave. And then he pulls out a drum and he starts beating on his drum. And he was encouraging everybody to meditate. And, I was not having any of that in this situation. So I'm just watching, observing, and people are meditating, doing some of their new age stuff. And it felt peaceful for a moment, right? When all of a sudden we heard this blood-curdling scream. And we look up, and this guy in the group is just shaking, and he is flailing his arms. And we all, people were trying to help him out. And when he settled down, he told us that a puma came through that portal-looking Stargate and entered him.
Oh.
And it literally, turned him, white-like and scared him to death. And so for me, this was like such a crazy experience to see, because it showed the connection, right, between the ancient knowledge, the ancient megaliths, and the spirit world, and obviously how you got to be very careful with this stuff, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the things that we really appreciated about the archaeologist who spent a day with us at Gilgal Rephaim last spring, Dr. Mike Freakman, who's done the most recent excavations there. He's a very careful scholar. He's not going to speculate, go beyond what the evidence suggests, but his conclusion is that based on the evidence, it's most likely that a site like that was used for a shaman to enter into an artificial underworld and communicate with the spirits. And really, that is the most logical explanation for most of these megalithic structures that serve no defensive purposes. Clearly, these are not granaries. These are not intended as giant school buildings or anything like that. These were built because the gods insisted that it be done, or because we needed to create this technology, in a sense, to bridge the gap between that realm and this one. And that's what these things are about. Now, whether they were built by demigod giants or not is another question. The fact is they were built, they still exist to this day, and it does speak to a more complicated history for humanity than most of us have been taught. Other than say, Peru or Stonehenge, what are some of the other most interesting sites that you visited, and why did they intrigue you?
Great question. Oh, man, I could talk forever about this. I've been going to Egypt the last couple of years, and each time I get back, I feel like, man, I've barely even scratched the surface here. Not just, there's always more to see, but just, again, the ancient knowledge and the mysteries. The Great Pyramid, I mean, it's got to be one of my most favorite sites of all. It stands approximately 500 feet tall. It's composed of 2.5 million multi-ton blocks that mainstream Egyptology wants us to believe was constructed by this massive workforce of slaves with, people cutting, shaping, and moving these giant limestone blocks with sleds and ramps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they want us to believe that Khufu of the dynastic Egyptian pharaoh Khufu built this over a period of 10 to 20 years. But if you kind of do the math, it's pretty much impossible, because that means if it happened over a 10 to 20 year period, all of these 2.5 million multi-ton blocks would have to be set into place every 2 minutes.
Huh.
And so you go inside the Great Pyramid and you realize, oh my word, this thing feels machine-like. You go inside the descending chamber that's like 300 feet long. And, even if you have just a little backpack on, it doesn't feel functional for a human. You're bent, you're doubled over because you can't stand upright. This feels like a maintenance shaft. And you can barely go down and up it with the modern day wooden railings and steps they've put in there. So how would the dynastic Egyptians of 3000 BC have traversed through this in a massive funeral procession with giant sarcophaguses, right? And statues without steps or railings.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in there, this is not possible. And so, again, there's so many great theories, like put out by author Christopher Dunn, and he was a great engineer, and I've been reading his latest books, and he theorizes the Great Pyramids were likely some sort of energy generators that were creating energy for this ancient civilization. So there's sites like that. Another one I would mention in Egypt is, and I might have told you this when we talked last on one of our interviews, but a lot of people don't realize there's megalithic statues in Egypt. And I believe these are giving us a glimpse of this pre-Diluvian original culture with ancient technology. There's 2,000-ton statues that are crafted from a single piece of granite with, again, laser-like precision. I believe these are ancient, they're weathered, but you can still see the precision on these. And I believe the dynastic Egyptians of 3000 BC, who came along later, kind of like the Inca, they found these incredible superstructures and they began to build on top of, around them, and emulate the look of this earlier culture. So these massive statues that you can see like at the Ramesseum, you can Google that and see the 1,000-ton statue there, or there's another one in Memphis. This thing is just precision and incredible. And again, when you look at the archaeological record, and this is something I should state when I'm talking about the Inca and the dynastic Egyptians, because the mainstream's own archaeological record says that the Inca had bronze chisels and stone hammers. Well, that cannot precision penetrate harder granite stone, right?
Right.
And so same in Egypt. The dynastic Egyptians, they had copper chisels and stone hammers. At best, sometimes they might have had a little bit of iron, but that could no way penetrate with laser-like precision the harder granite, rose granite, full of crystal stone that these statues and superstructures were made out of. And so they found this stuff and built on top of it. And there's so much more we could talk about in Egypt, but I don't want to go over our time here.
It's, if you had to construct a theory, like a unified field theory of anthropology that would account for these megalithic structures and megalithic statues that exist in a time before tools that are hard enough for the kind of work that, and by hard I mean of a strength, a tensile strength to cut through basalt or granite. What would your theory be? How do we explain these?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question right there. Well, I guess, again, not to be a killjoy, I guess I would say nobody knows with 100% certainty. We can only theorize. But I kind of lean towards, I guess when we think in terms of technology, you know, like we might think of a power saw. But these ancients might have had technology that we can't even wrap our minds around. In Egypt and in Peru, you see examples where it's like, and you've seen this, it's like they could soften stone, where the stone has this puffy look and where some of these knobs protrude out like it's marshmallow that was hardening, that was once soft. And so there's some theories that they used a type of acid. And there's even some legends by the dynastic Egyptians that might hint at they could soften the stone with a chemical formula and then harden it. And we see this at the third pyramid, which is, I think, known as the Khafre pyramid. And again, we see this all over in Peru and Cusco downtown, these puffy looking blocks. And some theorize that they even had a device that they would inject into the stone to soften it. And when they pulled out the device, that's where you get the marshmallow-like nub. So I definitely don't believe these nubs were made just to step on so you could get higher and keep using your chisel and hammer. Excuse me. So I think there might be something to softening stone. You know, you've got the whole geopalmer crowd. And I'm not saying I don't think the ancients could make some kind of ancient cement. They might have been able to do that, but I don't think that accounts for everything we see. Half the time when I post videos or photos of these incredible megalithic walls, people will just nonstop say, oh, that's geopalmer. Again, meaning they were basically using ancient cement. But that doesn't answer the questions of when you walk into a cave in Cusco, like I just described at Napa, Iglesia, or Huaca, where the cave has been shaped and fashioned with clearly ancient tools. No cement bags were used, right? It was cut away with laser-like precision. So it's funny how that crowd goes silent on those kind of posts. And then in Egypt, all over the Great Pyramid on the outside, you see what looks like, again, I hate to say it, laser-like saw cuts all over into the granite and the basalt. And inside the king's chamber on the Great Pyramid, if you look up close at the walls and on the so-called sarcophagus, which I believe was actually a box that probably housed an energy device, you see microscopic saw cuts, or not saw cuts, but lines, cuts from a tool. And then you see at Karnak, I can send you these photos. There's core drill holes this big, made into granite, rose granite, where you can see how the core drill was revolving. And this is ancient. This isn't a new, it's not a new drill hole. This is an ancient one that's super old. And you can see the weathering inside it. And so all that to say, I do believe they also had ancient tools. And I call the Aswan Quarry in Egypt one of the smoking guns to prove that there was a lost ancient technology. The Aswan Quarry is like 10 hours south of the Great Pyramid. But this is where all the rose granite from inside the Great Pyramid was brought. 10 hours away by car. They extracted all the rose granite you see in Egypt from this one spot, the Aswan Quarry, south of Luxor. Again, like 10 hours away by car. The crazy part is when you get to this quarry, and this was one of the coolest parts on our last Egypt tour. We had a handful of guys that didn't realize what kind of tours I lead. You know, these are alternative history where we're looking for ancient technology. And so we had some guys that were awesome, but they were not buying that there was ancient technology and lost history, right? And they would politely argue about it until we got to the Aswan Quarry. Again, up until this point, they all believed the mainstream version that the dynastic Egyptians just made all this with chisels and hammers. Well, when we got to the quarry and they saw the unfinished obelisk, which is like 1,200 tons, it's cut on three sides, but still sitting there. And we got to walk around it on our exclusive tour. And when you walk alongside this colossal obelisk, you see that every 1 meter, it's like a giant crane went down and scooped out the rose granite like it was Jell-O.
Wow.
And so, again, no chisel and hammer could ever account for this. These are 1 meter scoop marks that came down from the top and pulled out a chunk. And when they saw that, I remember this one guy he shook his head and he said, "Lost ancient technology."
Paradigm officially shifted.
I was like, yes.
Yeah. So, Derek, where are you planning to go next? And if people are interested in joining one of your tours, how do they do that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. You know, I'm getting a little bit of a late start, but I'm putting the finishing touches on next year's Peru tour, which is going to be a special one. It's going to be a Peru, Bolivia, Easter Island combo tour, to where anybody can do all of it kind of as one package, or anybody can just do one piece of it. So that's going to be in May of 2025. We're going to see the best sites right there in Cusco. Then we're going to go down into Bolivia and see Pumapunku, Tiwanaku. And then for those who want, we're going to go to Easter Island. So it's going to be incredible. Yeah. And then I'm trying to decide what my second tour is going to be at the end of 2025. It's either going to be Egypt or likely we're going to go to Cambodia and see all the ancient ruins there. So
Angkor Wat?
Yes. So people can go to stargatevoyager.com/tours, bookmark that, and as soon as these tours are posted, they'll go live there.
Well, if you ever want to come to Israel and see the megalithic sites there, we've got a few that we've bookmarked that we'll be going back to visit and do some more research on. It startles me that there are some there that nobody seems to know about. Even the Israelis don't know about these things. It doesn't help that like Gilgal Rephaim's 5 miles from the Syrian border. That probably is a deterrent for some folks. But anyway, fascinating. Please stay in touch, and we will likewise stay in touch with you because, again, we can't, as a Christian, just ignore these things and pretend that they don't exist. If we believe in a God who spoke the universe into creation, we have to be able to address these things and come up with a biblical response. But just from just a human geek standpoint, just going and marveling at these things is fascinating in and of itself, and appreciate you bringing these things to the rest of us through video and through images. So we will definitely share your links around. And Derek, we look forward to talking with you again.
Derek, thanks so much. This was awesome. I hope the listeners enjoyed it.
Check the notes below, whether you're watching or listening to this program, and you'll find a link to Derek Olson's work, formerly Megalithic Marvels, now Stargate Voyager. Very intriguing stuff, and we're happy that he is out there getting people interested in some of these mysteries. If you noticed we're in a different place today, well, you're right. Very observant of you. It's because I'm in Valley City, North Dakota for the Pitchfork and Hoe gathering. As I'm recording this on Friday night, I will be speaking tomorrow and Saturday. By the time you're watching this, it's all over. And if you didn't come to the gathering, you missed it. I've been talking about it for months. You need to stay after the break. And I especially hope you do this time, because we've got a very important announcement about our planned trip to Israel in November coming up after the break. Also, a young boy finds out the hard way that school is no place to repeat a meme. That's ahead on A View from the Bunker. It's time for back to school, and we have a special offer in September at the Gilbert House store.
Back to school, it's impossible to believe. Where did the year go? Well, October is also approaching, so we have a deal for you. $35 only plus shipping and handling will get you 2 amazing books and a CD, which is interviews with Dr. Michael Heiser.
Preparing you for All Hallows Eve, the month of October, when we begin to think about the spirit realm, our book Veneration, which takes a deep dive into the cult of the Nephilim around ancient Israel, the source of the demons that plague the world to this day.
And also a wonderful book by our friend Vicki Joy Anderson, They Only Come Out at Night. This is your manual for spiritual warfare. This should be in your church library.
Those 2 books plus a 7-hour audio CD with Dr. Michael S. Heiser discussing the unseen realm. These 2 books plus the CD, just $35 plus shipping and handling only at gilberthouse.org/store. Driving the internet to think every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, and this week from North Dakota. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You can find us online at VFTB.net. Social media, you'll find us at X, formerly Twitter, at View from Bunker, at Derek Gilbert, at Gilbert House _TV. Also on Truth Social, Gab, MeWe Getter, at Derek P. Gilbert, Threads, also on Facebook and YouTube at Gilbert House. Please subscribe, share, click that like button, click the bell for notifications, and then download our free mobile app to guarantee that we never get canceled. You see, that bypasses the gatekeepers. The content on our app comes directly from the Christian company that's developed the app directly to your smartphone or tablet, whether it's iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire. We've also got versions for Roku, Apple TV, and now Amazon Fire TV as well, Google TV too. So get that app onto your smart TV as well, and you can watch these programs, our weekly broadcast, Unraveling Revelation, and soon we're bringing back the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, and Sharon's starting a new podcast called The Armored Sheep. All of that in one handy little device. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/app, gilberthouse.org/app. Well, young man in Colorado City, Texas. I say young man, he's a 6th grader, 11 years old. Found out the hard way that repeating a funny meme that you saw on YouTube can get you in big, big trouble. You see, he was telling his friends, I just want to blow up ... Now, I put that ellipsis there because he didn't finish his sentence. His teacher heard that part of what he had said, and I'm not going to use his name because I don't want to embarrass him or his family. She heard, I just want to blow up, and her brain filled in the rest, thinking that he was talking about doing some harm to others in the school. So she sent him to the principal, Now, the young man said, look, it was a meme. It was just a funny video that I saw on YouTube. It's this rapper named Riff Raff. It was a guy who makes, and actually this video has been around on the web for a while. It was from back in the Vine days. You remember when Twitter launched Vine for short form video, and then TikTok came in and just sort of drove them out of business? Anyway, it's on YouTube now. The guy's got his teeth filed, so he's got shark teeth, basically. And what he said was, in full, I just want to blow up and then go around pretending I don't know anybody. In other words, he wanted to blow up the internet, get famous, and then pretend he was too important to talk to anybody. That's what this boy was saying. His teacher didn't believe him. The principal didn't believe him. School administrators didn't believe him. He was suspended. And the following day, Colorado City police came calling, and he was arrested. Yes, for being a potential terrorist. Again, all the while protesting, look, this is just this dumb meme by this rapper with shark teeth. And I've not followed up on the story this week, been busy getting ready for this pitchfork and hoe gathering, so I don't know how his court date turned out. But I just hope that the judge was a little more with it than his teacher, the principal, school, and me, frankly, I'd never heard of Riff Raff until this, but to the school board in Colorado City, Texas, bless your pointy little heads. Well, pitchfork and hoe gathering, as you're seeing this, it is already in the past, and well, maybe we'll be back next year. We'll find out. Certainly open to that. We've got a couple of other conferences to tell you about. Sharon participating in the Inspiring Women webinar. That is 1 month away, October 4th through 6th. This is being presented by Hear the Watchman. Other women who've got stories to tell. Sharon basically talks about how she found her voice, which is an apt title for her presentation because Sharon was a professional vocalist for a couple of decades, and she was offered a golden ticket at one point. You can hear that story and hear from other women like Vicki Joy Anderson, Tracy Tennant, Heidi Begley, Leslie Johnson, and more. And then on Sunday, October 6th, there's a live Q&A where you can interact with the speakers, ask questions directly, and get some feedback in real time. So find out more. As of this recording, still an early bird discount, $20 off registration at hearthewatchmen.com, hearthewatchmen.com. Now, December 5th through 8th, I'll be speaking at the Branson Christmas Prophecy Conference. This is from Prophecy Watchers. So Mondo Gonzalez, Josh Peck, and then just a lineup I'm honored to be a part of. L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Billy Crone, Dr. Ken Johnson, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, Alex Newman, Brandon Holthouse, Doug Hershey, Olivier Melnick, Larry Olson, many others. And it's at a wonderful facility. Sharon and I have actually stayed at the Chateau on the Lake in Branson. It is a gorgeous hotel, and this being the Christmas season, it will be done up for Christmas. Don't miss this. If you've got a couple of extra days, spend some time in Branson. Silver Dollar City at Christmas time is beautiful as well. More information at prophecywatchers.com and also Branson Christmas Prophecy Conference.com. And we hope we see you there. That'll be fun. Now, the announcement I mentioned before the break, our November Solidarity Mission to Israel, we had planned to go November 6th through 13th. And it's just looking like this is not going to work out this time. We did it in May, small group, 9 of us all together. It was a really powerful, and if you watched last week's program about the visit, you see what I mean. But with the security situation uncertain and the economy showing a lot of red flag indicators right now, there just isn't the response that would make it financially feasible for Lipkin Tours. So we are just going to put this off. No plans to reschedule at this point. We'll wait and see what happens in the next few weeks. Iran has been holding off despite the threats, threatening to respond to Israel for the assassination of the leader of Hamas in Tehran, which was a pretty bold strike by Israel. Israel's not claimed responsibility for it, but it's presumed that Israel was responsible. But the United States rushed a lot of naval assets to the area, 2 aircraft carriers and a nuclear-armed submarine, the USS Georgia, are in the vicinity. But as we're recording this, just today reported that the United States has let it be known to Benjamin Netanyahu that those aircraft carriers can't stay there forever. Basically saying, get things squared away. Well, as if it's within the power of Benjamin Netanyahu to compel Iran or Hamas or Hezbollah to do anything. So we'll see what happens. As of now, our tour next spring, the Iron and Myth Tour with Timothy Alberino, Doug Van Dorn, and Dr. Judd Burton, that is still a go. We are still going to be there March 25th through April 3rd. That information has all been updated at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel, gilberthouse.org/travel. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen, as the case may be. If you're watching, great. Subscribe, share, click that bell for notifications, and then download our app. And then, if you're listening, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Thank you. If you got a spare moment, we'd appreciate a good review. Our announcer, the inimitable DC Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives, 4.0 international license. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Pray for the peace in Jerusalem. Good night, Oliver, from North Dakota. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.